got it. Okay, thanks. Good morning, Erin. Oh, her sound isn't on yet. Yep. Scott, welcome. Sorry, trying. Just well, I guess we would normally let everyone at 5 till, so yeah, go ahead and see. You want to keep doing this since they're like individual? Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So, yeah. Yep.
Rhonda, will you let me know when we have quorum? I don't think I see it yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
I keep trying to scroll the participant list.
We need 2 more members.
Could be an hour and a half, might be 2.
Okay, so you can't help your business.
Until later.
Huh?
Until later.
Well, I don't understand that count.
After my meeting's over, I can go over and see him.
You can't help your dad sit in this.
Oh. Oh, okay. No.
Okay, Erin, we have quorum.
Okay, welcome everybody. We'll call this meeting to order. Today is Thursday, June 3rd for our TAC. Oh, okay. Okay, sorry, I had to consent to that. So the meeting is being recorded. So welcome everybody. We will just move right into roll call. Rhonda.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the TAC. Coconino County, Lucinda Andriani. She's expected, but is not on yet. I'll come back. Coconino County Citizen Representative Jillian Thomas is excused. Sorry, one moment. Yeah, we can. Okay. City of Flagstaff, Shane Dilly.
Present.
Thank you. City of Flagstaff Citizen Representative Kevin Parks.
Present.
Thank you. Metro Plan, Dave Wessel is excused, and we're expecting Jeff Milebeck, but I don't believe he's on yet. NAU, Aaron Stom.
Here.
Thank you. NAU student, Maylee Acosta.
Present.
Thank you. CCC, Kurt Stull.
Present.
Thank you. And our Economic Development Representative, Gail Jackson.
Here.
Thank you. We have our attorneys, Scott Holcomb and Chris Beecher, both on the line.
Good morning, all.
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you. And we have Rick Tatter from the City of Flagstaff also joining us as a guest.
Good morning, everyone.
And I'm just going to go back. Coconino County, Lucinda Andriani has not joined, or Metro Plan Jeff Milebeck, to my knowledge. So we are expecting them, in case you find that they joined, in the conversation later on. And we have staff here in the room, in the training room, at the office, and on Zoom. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Perfect. Thanks, Rhonda. We will go right into our safety minute with Sam Short.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. June's Safety Minute is on sharing the road and bicycle safety. So there's no secret that our community has an abundance of bicycle traffic. With this increased bicycle traffic, it is very important that motor vehicle drivers use extreme caution and do all that we can do to allow bicyclists the ability to use the road safely. The Arizona Department of Transportation statistics show that on average, Flagstaff has approximately 52 bicycle collisions every year. Statistics also show that almost half of these collisions are on or within a mile of the campus of Northern Arizona University. Several other locations within Flagstaff that have high bicycle collision rates are the areas of Butler Avenue and Milton Road. Regardless of the location, here are some of the things vehicle operators can do to make the road safer for bicyclists. Keep at least 3 feet of space between you and the bicycle, more if possible. Pass on the left. Wait to pass until the traffic lane next to you is clear. This means on a 2-lane highway, wait until the opposing lane is clear. On roads with more than 2 lanes, wait until the traffic lane on your left is clear before changing lanes. Be patient. You should only pass when it is safe, even if this means driving behind a cyclist for a little while. Always check your blind spot for cyclists. Always pay special attention at a crosswalk. Do not be a distracted driver. Put away anything that could distract your attention from where it needs to be, your surroundings. One of the most important areas to be aware of bicyclists is at intersections. Cyclists going straight or turning right will usually be on the right side of the vehicle in an intersection. So it is extra important to look for them if you are turning right. Cyclists are also able to use the left turn lane at an intersection, so stay alert when the light changes. At the end of the day, it is all about sharing the road. Remember, bicyclists have as much right to the road as cars. Stay patient and alert so everyone can go home safe. Thank you and welcome to the June Transit Advisory Committee meeting.
Thanks, Sam. I don't know if that was something that you guys had already planned or in response to the recent accident over here on Butler and Beaver, but very important reminder. Thank you for sharing that. Next is approval of the TAC minutes from April 1st. No joke. First, are there any comments or questions, any clarifications needed on the minutes? And I will do my best to watch for hands today, or just chime in. Okay, I don't see any comments or questions coming in. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved, Aaron.
Is that Shane? Thanks, Shane.
Yes.
Can I get a second?
Second, this is Kurt Stahl.
Thank you, Kurt. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Moving on to our draft board business agenda. The first item up is microtransit pilot in the Huntington and Industrial Corridor. Estella.
Thank you, Chair and members of the TAC. Estella Hollander, a mobility planner with Mountain Line, and staff are seeking the board to close the comment period from the microtransit pilot, as well as approve the proposed microtransit pilot. So next slide, please, Rhonda. So first, some quick background to make sure we're all on the same page. Mountain Line received a grant from CTAA, or the Community Transportation Association of America, to test out a mobility on-demand solution, which I'll go into more detail in the next few slides on what that term means. And this is one-time grant funding for the planning and implementation of a pilot. Next slide, please. And so the pilot is focusing on the Huntington and Industrial Corridor. This has been an identified geographic gap in a variety of planning studies. And really the goal of this pilot is to increase access to this area. And so it is pictured on the right-hand side here, which this area is home to a variety of human service agencies, nonprofits, there's a few clinics as well. So it's really an area that needs additional mobility options and better access. Next slide, please. And so mobility on demand is basically an umbrella term for transportation services that can be hailed in real time, meaning they are typically on either an app or a calling option. They are flexible, meaning they don't follow a fixed route or a schedule, and utilize emerging technologies. This is usually through partnerships with software companies, or it could be also with Uber and Lyft, et cetera. And so Mountain Line will be testing microtransit, which will be utilizing our paratransit vehicles, which is pictured on the right-hand side. And this will be open to the general public and essentially turning these vehicles almost into Ubers and Lyfts. So again, they will be flexible and people can hail them in real time. Next slide, please. And so this is the proposed service area. Typically on-demand services, there is a geofence zone, so it will not be serving the whole area or the whole city, but really again, focusing on this Huntington Industrial Corridor. And so the middle area, that kind of longer yellow rectangle, that is where people can be picked up and dropped off throughout that entire area. And then the blue circles, those are the nearby transit stops. And so people can get picked up from a fixed route and then dropped off to the yellow area. So those blue circles are pick up and drop off points. This area may still have some minor changes, as staff would like to review this with a microtransit software vendor, which we're currently trying to get on board, just to make sure that this area is effective and productive as possible. So next slide, please. Or sorry, I do see a hand up. I'm happy to take it now. Or
Thanks for catching that, Shane.
Estella, I didn't mean to break your rhythm. If questions are preferred at the end, I'm happy to do it then. Whatever you prefer.
I'm trying to take it now if it's about the slides I've covered.
Yeah, if you could go back to the previous slide, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you, Estella. So can you elaborate a little bit as to why this particular area was chosen for this pilot program? It's a heavy industrial area. And so it just piqued my curiosity as to why that area and not something more retail centric or residential centric? Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you for the question, Shane. And so this area, it is very industrial. It's low density. And so this area doesn't necessarily warrant fixed route since it is low density. There isn't a lot of commercial, as you mentioned. However, it does have a lot of human service agencies. So the shelter is located there, Hajoni, as well as the food bank, the guidance center. There's also a high school in there, 2 different clinics, dialysis. So it's really, it's an area that's more, I guess, socially orientated. And so really trying to improve the equity in this area to provide better access. So although there is nearby transit, which you can see on this map, there is railroad tracks to the north or just south of 66, and then as well as the I-40 to the south. So it's really causing some physical barriers to access the nearby transit. And so this has been an area that Mountain Line has gotten comments from the public of needing to provide service to the shelter, et cetera. So that's the main reasons we've been wanting to try and test this area for microtransit, since it doesn't necessarily warrant a fixed route, but it does need some sort of transportation option. Thanks,
Estella. A follow-up question that I think that response begs a little bit, but is this a fee-based, is there a charge for this microtransit? And if we're serving a vulnerable population that might largely not be in a position to pay for those services, what do we expect the outcome to be? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so, or Rhonda, do you mind going to the next slide? I will go over fare. And so the fare will be $1 each way. Staff did feel like there needed to be some sort of payment just to help kind of that, pay for your ride. And so it doesn't have some sort of kind of ownership in getting on the system. So it is $1 a ride one way, making it easier since our current fare is $1.25. So making just a little bit easier to either have that cash option. With microtransit, there will be an app-based option as well. So people, if they do have a debit or credit card, can pay through the app. But obviously, if people are unbanked or choose not to put their debit or credit card information in there, there will be a cash option as well. And so some additional program updates is the hours of service. So this will be Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., weekdays from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then holidays following that similar weekend schedule. And so this is to ensure that the service is running when there's the most need. So when people are going to the various human service agencies, but as well as coordinating with our dispatch, making sure that there's someone there to answer phone calls in case people don't have a smartphone and want to get a ride through the call-in option. An additional update is procurement. So we're currently in the middle of a request for proposals or RFP for a software solution. So this is to get a software company on board to provide the app as well as the driver application that kind of group people together based on their origins and destinations. And so we received 9 responses, which is the most we've ever had from an RFP. So it's a lot to read, but we ended up kind of bringing it down to the top 3 vendors, which will be conducting interviews next week. So we should hopefully have someone on board in the next couple weeks. So next slide, please. And so for the Title VI comment period, which started on April 21st and continuing through June 16th. And so we advertised this comment period through flyers, which were flyers at the nearby bus stops. We also had social media posts. There was a website or a page on our website where people could post comments, as well as emailed out to various listservs. And so we received 5 positive comments. I listed out a few on this slide, but in general, there was just a lot of excitement around this pilot. Few things like love the partnership between the shelter and the food kitchen, great for seniors who may not qualify for paratransit, but get exhausted, walking these longer distances. Love the innovation, as well as just, excellent service for the community can help reduce the social determinants of health. So those are just a few of the comments that we received. Next slide, please. And so, as mentioned, staff are recommending the board to close the public comment period, as well as approve the proposed microtransit pilot. And so with that, I'm open to any additional questions.
Shane, I don't know if your hand is, I think you raised your hand again.
I did. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Aaron. Estella, so during the public comment period, how many comments did we receive total?
It was just those 5 positive. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What would you say the cost recovery is if we're charging that $1 per ride? What do you expect to see by way of cost recovery? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the estimated ridership, I believe, was around 20 trips per day. Granted, this was based on pre-COVID numbers, so I will be curious, kind of as COVID is still around, as we know, how that will affect ridership. So if it is around 20, you know, if it's each one-way trips, that's $2. So it's around $40 a day. Granted, we do have grant funds to pay for the operations of this pilot. So it's not an expectation that this pilot will run, you know, solely based on these fares. We're really needing those grant funds to pay for the operations of this pilot.
Any other comments or questions for Estella?
I do.
Madam Chair.
There you go. Hi, Gail. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not finding the hand today.
You're fine. You're fine.
I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the partnership between the, you mentioned the shelter and the food kitchen. What does that look like?
Thank you. And so we have a microtransit stakeholder committee that meets monthly, and that includes various community members, but as well as staff from the various human service agencies that are located in this corridor. So they are participating, making sure they were really a key part in defining the service area of this pilot, as well as the hours of service, making sure that we're trying to capture kind of their high ridership time, or, you know, peak times of service that they're generating the most foot traffic, et cetera. And so that is the partnership that they are participating in this planning effort. I think we can expand that potentially further in making sure that they can help some of their clients get rides and potentially, you know, call rides, things like that. So but they are heavily in the planning process as well.
Awesome. Do you have data that shows, I mean, how many people took part? And maybe that was earlier and I missed it, but how many riders did you get from this?
So we are still in the planning process. We're planning on launching the pilot in August. And so far we don't have ridership numbers, but it is estimated around 20 per day.
Great, thanks.
Heather.
I want to go back and further answer Shane's question about cost recovery, if I could, and then maybe talk a little bit about, you know, next steps in how we plan for the cost of this program. So Shane, we do anticipate this will be a subsidized program, as is all transit programs. The actual cost of doing the service is not that different than our existing services. We anticipate it will be less expensive than our paratransit services, more expensive than our fixed route service. So somewhere in that range, and I'm sorry, I don't have those dollar figures readily available, but I want to point out that one of the parts of this that we're using, especially during the pilot, is that we are taking the downtime of existing staff and existing vehicles to provide this service. So we're going to save cost on our paratransit side by using these vehicles to provide a different revenue service. And so just wanted to clarify that a little bit. And those are details that we still need to fully demonstrate to the board. But I hope, Shane, that does a better job of really addressing the cost recovery issue as we move forward. But I wanted to clarify a little bit if I could. And I think it did also pertain to Member Jackson's question too about how we're providing the service.
Thank you, Heather. I really appreciate that. And you know, I find myself in the hopeful corner. This is an exciting endeavor, and I'm actually I'm going to be, you know, watching and waiting on bated breath, in terms of seeing the outcome of the pilot program. I think it is a very interesting, opening a lot of different doors in terms of what transit service might look like going forward into the future, to some extent, and not intending to mean that there's a replacement for the fixed routes at all, but in terms of really reaching a niche and a need in the community, I think this really has a lot of potential. So I'm hopeful that we're far more successful than what your projections identify, 20 rides a day, but time will tell on that. So I appreciate the explanation. I'd like to believe that the population in general, having services like Lyft and Uber, now a common feature in our society, those services definitely don't run subsidized. They run at a profit, and I'm hopeful that we can find a way to provide a service like a government entity does, where we're not in to make the profit, we're in to provide a service, and to do so hopefully at some kind of cost neutral or break even standpoint. I think there's a potential for that too. So I'm really interested to see the outcome of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Thank you, Estella. I don't see any other hands up, so thank you very much. Next item is the FY22 proposed budget. Heather.
So good morning, Transit Advisory Committee members. Lori Batiste is out of the office, so I'm covering this final step in our fiscal year 2022 budget on her behalf. And I don't have anything new to present for you today. Generally, our process is to spend the time in prior meetings really covering the details, but I will do a high-level summary of the information that was shared. Next slide. So we are looking to adopt a $39 million budget. It does include all of the components of our workforce strategies as discussed and reviewed in April. This does include a pay plan that allows staff to achieve between 3% and 4% annually on their anniversary. It does provide the ongoing benefits and includes that Mountain Line will share in the cost increases for health benefit programs. Next slide. It also does allow for development of staff through various components, including our wellness program, which has been well received in our organization. Next slide. So briefly, again, our workforce budget, it is a 2% increase to our, oops, you disappeared on me. Oh, there you are. It does include a 2% increase to our indirects and a 7%, I'm having a hard time reading the screen, a 7% increase to our direct operational cost. This does provide, like I said, for the pay plan as well as those increase in benefits. And then I will also note this is 3 new full-time positions, one in our facilities department, one in our fleet department, and then 2 half-time positions in our administrative functions. Next slide. So the overall change is 5.9%. And just as a reminder, our pay plan for our operations staff is actually 4.5%. And our total employee count is about 98 employees, and 53 or more qualify for the 4.5% pay increase. So that's a big portion of our overall change to our workforce budget. Next slide. So moving out of workforce and looking at the budget request, this slide does demonstrate the change in budget across our programs. And you'll see that the bus program is increasing by 8% from 21 to 22, while our paratransit program is decreasing by 24%. And a big contributing factor to this is the fact that we have merged those two programs in a lot of ways so that we're achieving some cost savings and efficiencies. Our staff are now defined as transit operators. They're no longer assigned to bus or paratransit. They work on both sides of the house. We've been able to combine management positions and reduce some of those wages. So we've shifted cost in that respect. And again, the program does include for those pay increases, which is such a big part of our pay plan or part of our budget. The planning budget does grow up by 46%, and this is strictly due to a change in how we account for the team members. They've previously been absorbed in one-time and capital projects. Here we're showing them as part of our reoccurring staff. We have a small increase in the city taxi program, while the county taxi and the van pool stay flat. And the general fund, we do still project to get advertising revenues in the general fund, but we have no projected expenses out of the general fund in fiscal year 2022. Next slide. So overall, it is a 3.7% increase to our budget, total operating budget across all programs. The transit tax itself is a much more significant increase. I think it was 9%. I thought the percentages were on here, so I apologize. And a big portion of the transit tax increase is related to our capital programs. Next slide. This is just a quick review of the different capital programs that we have in 2022. So $7.1 million in bus and bus infrastructure. So this includes 2 new all-electric buses, bus charging stations, I'm sorry, not bus charging stations, the CDL course in partnership with NAU. We have capitalized repairs and rehabilitation. This is our ongoing effort to state of good repair for our fleet to ensure that we get that 15 years useful life out of them instead of the 12. Shelter pads and installation. This capital budget is contingent upon some federal funds that we're still hoping to achieve. If we don't receive those funds, we will not spend that project. Facility cost and transfer centers. The big one here is our downtown connection center. And then we have the miscellaneous, which includes the electrification plan of $3 million. And then we have our route construction, which has the carryover from the BRT, which we know will now support the DCC and other projects. Next slide. At the end of the day, when we spend all of the different federal sources and other sources we have for the proposed budget, we want to demonstrate how that impacts our transit tax fund balance with the city of Flagstaff. And I will note that this does include a capital set aside of 20% for all buses that need to be replaced between now and 2030. So the blue line demonstrates the fund balance that we're projecting we will have. The red line is the 25% fund balance the board has asked us to demonstrate as available. Couple of footnotes on the fund balance. It is higher than we would normally show. There are a couple of things that our financial plan does not yet account for, and that is the ongoing operating cost once we move to electric vehicles. We are still working to determine what that will be. The operating and maintenance cost for the new downtown connection center, we hope as we finish up the plans that we're working on, that will have a more defined, this is the date we plan to move in and this is the footprint. So these are the ongoing operations and maintenance cost. Outside of that, we will be using our 5-year plan to determine if there are services that we could introduce and sustain under this fund balance scenario. So with that, that's everything I have that was presented on the fiscal year 2022 budget. Next slide. So we'll be asking the board to adopt a $39,409,945 budget to include both operating and capital programs. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Heather? Shane.
Heather, why are you
Yeah.
smiling?
I was waiting for you, Shane.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Actually, I I think I'm going to surprise you. I really appreciate your budget presentation, and I think I have just a tangent question, not directly related to the information provided here, but as you contemplate the downtown connection center reality and moving part of your operations to that facility, what are your plans for the existing facility? I know that you're still going to have a presence there, and it serves as a critical function in your operational needs.
Right.
But will you have space there that could potentially be leased out, or you looking at additional revenue generation from from that existing facility? Thank you.
Of course, thanks for the question. And Shane, I was smiling because I always appreciate the questions that you ask. So the goal, although we don't have a clear and defined plan, is to really change how we use our existing facility. So yes, we will be moving many of our administrative functions down to the new Downtown Connection Center, but our actual operations, reporting structure, the buses themselves will all stay on the existing site. And that includes our facilities maintenance teams and our fleet maintenance. So all fleet maintenance will continue to happen at our existing building. We're in the middle of, and I think there's a update today on the Caspar headquarters master plan that we're really kicking off to establish what do we need out of this site as we grow. We know that the building where we're storing our vehicles now went into service in 2015, maybe 2016, and we're pretty much at capacity in that building. The decision to buy articulated buses has been great in serving our programs, but was not part of our original building design. So we know we're going to need more space to store buildings and to change how we maintain those buildings. And we'll be looking at how to modify our existing facility for that 20-year outlook and need.
Thanks, Heather. Any other questions or comments for Heather? Okay, we will move on. Next item is Flagstaff in Motion Service Priorities. Busy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the TAC, Busy Collins, Transit Planner. Next slide, please, Rhonda. First, I wanted to thank all TAC members for their valuable feedback and discussion at the May meeting. And today, I'll briefly review that guidance received from TAC and board, and also ask a few more clarifying questions to guide scenario development. And I welcome questions and comments from the TAC throughout this presentation. Next slide, please. So to summarize a few high-level points that we heard, transit is important to the Flagstaff community. And while not all Flagstaff residents ride transit, it is a critical service for those who do ride, and it's a crucial tool to mitigate affordability and climate action issues that our community is really concerned about. Next slide. And the top 3 reasons why transit is important to the Flagstaff community is to help ensure a more sustainable future, kind of getting at that affordability climate, helps bridge equity and affordability gaps, and reducing traffic congestion. More people on buses means less cars on the road. Next slide, please. And if Mountain Line received additional funding, staff should prioritize new service according to higher frequency. We definitely heard a very high value on frequency in our transit service, but also many members wanted to split funding between coverage, so service to new areas, and frequency. And then some also wanted to invest all coverage for new routes. So I think we definitely heard that we want it all. Maybe higher frequency is higher on the prioritized list, but there's definitely some coverage needs. Next slide, please. And how transit can provide and fund service to the new NAH facility in Fort Tuthill is an ongoing conversation and will be discussed later in the agenda. But in May, many thought that there is synergy between the airport and the hospital and Mountain Line should look for partnerships with both organizations to achieve transit coverage in that area. And also to the question, should a sales tax approved by city residents fund services outside of the city? Directors and members thought it is appropriate if there are direct impacts and benefits to the city of Flagstaff and its residents, and that we clearly need to draw that line, connect the dots for the public on what those impacts are and quantify them. And it was also suggested that transit could be funded in a similar way to the reclaimed water that's provided by the city, and I really appreciate that suggestion. So those are some high-level points. And next slide, please, Rhonda. Staff wanted to clarify and kind of dig into a couple items specifically. So we touched on the frequency and the coverage. So in the current funding scenario, so no additional funding received, do you think that current transit service is sufficient to support Flagstaff's future growth? And if you have comments very specifically on the frequency needs to increase or coverage and where, I would love to hear those details. So I'll kind of open it up here to TAC members for any comments and discussion.
Comments for Busy. Shane.
I'm sorry. I just
No apologies needed.
don't laugh too hard, Heather. Hey, so Busy. This was a question asked at the advance or the retreat, right?
Yes. Yeah,
So-
and we're really, oh, go ahead.
So what? Remind us what the outcome of that survey poll was in answer to this question.
Yeah, we had a pretty even split on this one. There was, I think we definitely heard that some frequency is important to our riders, and it's very attractive to gather new riders. And that I definitely heard that, future growth might create an even higher need for increased service and, an even split between frequency and coverage on that service. But looking to just dig in a little bit more, we didn't quite get details on, specific areas of coverage, specific areas that increased frequency is needed.
So if I could just repeat back what I thought I heard just now is when we did this survey, when we polled the board members and the TAC on this particular question, we got kind of a lukewarm response. It was kind of split down the middle. Half of the group felt like current transit service is sufficient to support future growth, and half felt that it wasn't. Is that what you're saying? And you're just wanting to now take an opportunity to dive in a little bit more on what at least this group is thinking?
Yes, and specifically into areas. We definitely heard that there's a need, but which areas specifically?
Areas being frequency or coverage, or frequency in certain areas and coverage in certain areas. Is that where you're trying to get to?
Yeah, if for example, if you felt that, coverage is the needed priority, the top priority, where would that coverage be? Or if you think frequency is very much that top priority, where is additional frequency needed?
Input for Busy.
I'd like to add a few comments if appropriate. I think first, relative to the prior slide, relative to NAH and, their relocation to the Fort Tuthill area. Obviously, that's going to go through quite a process, but I think that I would just really encourage that the leadership Mountain Line, Nate, that every public opportunity there is, and I appreciate that Kate was participating in the Parks and Recreation Commission, County Parks and Recreation Commission meeting where they presented that you were there. They're also going to be presenting to the Board of Supervisors on June 8th at 4 o'clock. And I think it would be good to participate in that. I think there will certainly likely be questions. And if you have questions, I mean, I'm very happy to work with the board on specific questions you may want to have the board members pursue. I'm going to be talking with them specifically about making sure there's a discussion about transit, because we're very interested in getting, if we're going to have this level of expansion in that area, one, we need transit for just to serve the hospital, let alone the development that's going to take place adjoining that area. And then, I mean, we're very interested in having increased transit access for activity at Fort Tuthill. So, because we'd rather not continue to spend a lot of money on parking lots and taking up space with parking lots if we can get people onto buses. I just spent the long weekend in Mammoth Lakes in California, and they have a phenomenal bus system there that and an incredible bike trail system that goes way into the forested area, the Forest Service area, it's an incredible attraction for that area. And I mean, I don't know how many thousands of people were up there that weekend with bikes. So anyway, I just think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. So I frankly, there's been a little bit of concern about getting them to focus on this. They've obviously got a big project, a lot of moving parts. So I think we need to be bringing that issue forward continuously through every public venue there is where they present, and bringing that forward. And then in terms of the areas of service, certainly outside the Flagstaff proper, we're continuing to see a great deal of development in Belmont. And I think a couple other things with Belmont is we're seeing potentially some industrial expansion there. And then people may or may not be aware, there were 3,000 acres there converted from basically federal to state land. And I know we're going to be working with the state on what that potential development plan could look like for that area. So that's longer term, of course, but there's also some short-term things happening there, several new developments coming in. I think that area in transit is probably something we need to be looking at over the next year or so. And is there an opportunity or an interest there to utilize transit or not? So. And lastly, sorry, I joined late, had an issue I had to deal with, but back to the budget, I'm sure you're watching very carefully the American Jobs Act progress in Congress. My memory is that there's some pretty big ticket dollars for transit in that, as I recall. Certainly there is for traditional transportation infrastructure. And it looks like those elements are getting some gravity in both parties. Just an obvious thing, make sure that you've accounted for more funds coming over the next year, so that you have the capacity to spend those if you're successful. You all are so successful at getting grants. I know you'll be very competitive in whatever you do. So anyway, we're just trying to make sure we're building in enough capacity under the expenditure limit to be able to, to spend those funds if you're successful in bringing them in. So anyway, just some things I wanted to share. Lastly, we're hiring a new transportation planner here at the county, and we're really going to move that role into a much more proactive role. And we're also bringing a consultant in to do some specific planning in the areas where we anticipate development. Actually, two different consultants, one for the Belmont area, one for the greater Donny Park area. And, they'll be in contact with you too to talk about how do we think about transit for the long-term future of those communities as well. So Thank you.
Thanks, Lucinda. Kevin?
Sorry, the mic's way over on the other side of the screen. Anyway, listen, reflecting on this question during our breakout session, but also since, I'm also looking forward to what our pilot project on microtransit produces, because I think if we are successful there in the Huntington corridor, where there are so many services offered and which riders want to get to, that we could also extend such a service into some of our city suburb neighborhoods that do not receive fixed transit service now. I mean, another great use of a microtransit system, I'm on that steering committee, so I've actually been reading about it around the country, is to move riders from lower density use areas, such as our suburban residential areas, to places where they can catch buses on the fixed route system. And so I think there is a success story there for wider coverage using the microtransit approach. I would say, though, the frequency would go up for those areas closer in town where population density or residential density is increasing, and to be following when those uses are during a given day. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Any additional feedback, input for Busy?
Madam Chair, I have
Sure.
some comments.
Go ahead, Gal.
Thanks. So in regards to the growth patterns, from an economic development standpoint, we're seeing a lot of activity around the outskirts. So to tag on to what Lucinda said, Belmont is hopping right now. And we've had a couple major industrial users come in who have specifically asked about transit. One of them actually pulled out of Belmont because they didn't like that there wasn't access to transit for their employees. So from that perspective, we're doing an inventory right now of some of the available land that's available for development. So we're looking at like Loop Road, Flag Ranch Road for industrial development. So I would encourage, yes, I think the west side is important and there is going to be a lot of growth there. And perhaps, there's some sort of park and ride at the airport or in that 32-acre area for people that are coming in from Kachina and Mountain Air. And as far as Munns Park, we've got people commuting up from Camp Verde. So I would think that area would be good if there was a stop there or something that could get people into town. One of the other areas that I think you should keep an eye on is Williams. There is a major development that is currently in escrow, 500 acres, with the potential of adding up to 1,000 new homes and an amusement park. So that's going to not only bring the tourists, but it's also going to it's going to change Williams. So and we already have a lot of our commuters coming in from that area. So and of course, then the Donny Park area, I know that's outside of Flagstaff, but again, we're really looking at that Loop Road. That land's been available for a while. There's some infrastructure needs, but it's probably the next ripest piece of land to be developed for industrial use. So just wanted to throw that out. Yes, I think frequency is important and it would obviously increase usage of people using the system. But I do think that they're, in the outer lying areas that filter into the county, we should be considering that because I think that's where a lot of the growth is going to take place. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Any other feedback? Okay, thanks, Busy. Appreciate the information.
Absolutely, thank you. And I have just a few more slides and one more
Go
question.
for it. Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Actually,
problem.
Madam Chair and Busy,
Yes,
if I could just jump in real quick on the comments that we've been hearing. From a planning standpoint, all that makes incredible sense, and it's important to keep all that on our radar. But that has to be supported through some kind of funding mechanism, and that gets at the heart of your question, Busy. I think one that was part of our polling exercise at the retreat. Is it, is there support for a local tax to provide service outside of the city limits? Right now, the primary funding source comes from the residents here and the business owners here in Flagstaff. So, kind of part and parcel to the idea of extending service outside of the city limits is how are we going to pay for that? And I think that's an important point, to leave on the table as we consider these wonderful opportunities to expand critical transit service to these other areas. Thank you.
Excellent point, Shane. I so appreciate that. And I do, kind of want to ask back to the TAC members, I heard a lot of needs, and I definitely feel like most of those needs are with additional funding. And I just want to clarify with everybody that, is there any service that we should be reallocating current funding to provide? Say we do not get, additional funding in the next 5 years. What do we absolutely need to do as, our transit service, where or how frequency? I definitely think, and I'm hearing, hospital is a very high priority for this community. That's coming online quickly. I guess just back to the TAC members, anywhere that you would reallocate current service and funding to provide.
Shane, I see your hand. I just wasn't sure if it was.
Yeah, I just raised it.
Okay,
Aaron,
thank
sorry.
you. Thanks. No, you're fine. You're fine. I just don't
my
know.
arm is getting kind of tired. I'm going to have to regulate myself a little bit here, but Busy, I know we're talking hospital a lot, and that certainly is a big one, and one that we have to stay watching and engaged on. But I think aligned with the hospital is the airport, and we need to make sure that it seems logical that if we find our way to make a route out to Fort Tuthill, the hospital, that the airport is just all right packaged together with that, because I think the airport is a critical piece of the infrastructure that feeds the transit and our local businesses and what have you. So I think the airport has to be part of that. Thanks.
Okay, we have a few. Lucinda and then Gail.
Yeah, first, I really agree with Shane on that point that, part of this is getting that service out to the airport, I think is really, really critical. And certainly the NAH development should help hopefully facilitate that. In terms of funding, for services outside of the city, I think relative to Belmont and what's occurring, for development in that area, I think we really ought to look at having that conversation with the board. They're going on break now, but when they come back off a break, I think that may be a conversation. It's time to have that conversation and start talking about what does that look like so that we can get some policy direction relative to new development coming in. And that what are those conversations that the board wants us to be having with those developers? Because frankly, it's probably largely going to have to be paid for by those coming in to occupy either existing facilities in the case of industrial and or new development, right? And how does that get integrated in? What's that discussion and that conversation? So, and what does that funding mechanism potentially look like? So, and or is there opportunities? You know so much more about this arena than we do. Are there opportunities at the federal level for the county to secure funds, compete for funds at that level? We've never really had enough interest or enough gravity to start really going down this path. And is this time to do that? Is it time to really start going down that path, particularly for that specific area? Thank you.
Thanks, Lucinda. Gail.
Thanks. I just wanted to thank Shane for his comments on the airport, because it's critical to have service out there. As someone who frequently flies, it's hard to get an Uber. I live very close to the airport, so oftentimes if I can't get a ride home, you wait for a cab or you call an Uber and you wait 30, 40 minutes before someone comes out. And I think that if it's not already being studied, I sure hope that it is. The flights are pretty consistent. We know when they're coming in. So dropping off and picking up people shouldn't be hard. But I really think that that's an area that's only going to help our regional economic engine, as well as, lessening the driving to and from the airport. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Gail. Okay, back to you, Busy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next slide, please, Rhonda. I so appreciate everybody's discussion and really digging into these topics. It helps guide scenario development that we'll be presenting to you in August. So thanks again. Last question. So here's some background information. As a reminder, Mountain Line collects 29 cents for every $100 purchase in sales tax revenue. And pictured here are last year's board priorities for new services. So now we're considering new funding sources and new services. And in 2020, when this was created, we have cost estimates based on 2020 dollar value. And we did estimate that items 1 through 6 could be achieved through a 50% increase in tax revenue. And all of these costs are being re-examined and refined and will be presented in scenarios in August. But at that time, we felt confident in that. So just as an FYI, that would be an additional 15 cents for every $100 purchase. And staff also thought that this complete list, items 1 through 10, could be achieved if we doubled sales tax revenue for transit service to Mountain Line, by Mountain Line. So with those in mind, next slide, please, Rhonda. I would love to hear from the TAC, should we consider a higher transit tax as transit scenarios are developed? And if yes, is there a limit? Does that 50% feel right? Does that feel too high? Is a double in the transit tax rate too high? So open it up to the TAC members for discussion.
Thoughts for Busy? So I'll share my own. I try to give others an opportunity to share first. When you first said it, I thought, oh, that's a big jump, but I think we would just have to make the case of what they're getting for it. So I think that just, the devil will be in the details to sell it properly. Because there's a lot to get, a lot. So. Other thoughts? Come on now, we're talking about money. Everybody has an opinion when it comes to money. Okay, we can allow folks, if somebody, oh, there we go. Thank you, Shane. Go ahead.
I certainly have an opinion, Aaron, but I think the proof is in the pudding, Busy. I mean, it's hard for me to answer this particular question unless we're actually talking about a specific scenario and a cost associated with that scenario, so that you can see, what the benefits are by by moving into a new area or adding a route or adding, more frequency. I just think the way the question for me is posed, it makes it difficult for me to provide a response. It's just not defined enough for me to really feel comfortable. I think it makes sense to say, hey, listen, we have our existing service. Should we consider a higher transit tax as we expand? Well, to me, that makes sense, because the only other alternative is that we're really not expanding, we're trading. We're lessening a service somewhere to enhance a service somewhere else. And, so to me, it makes sense. It's intuitive that if we're going to expand, we need to also increase our tax. I guess one could argue, and I'm just thinking out loud, one could argue, well, if you increase ridership, do you really need to increase the tax? I'm not sure. I guess that's where the proof is in the pudding. So that's why I hesitated to respond initially. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Busy.
Thanks, Shane. Okay. We will continue to go on, but if somebody wants to share their thought later on, please feel free to do that. Okay.
Thanks. And that's the last question I have. Again, I appreciate
Okay.
your feedback. And just as a reminder, we'll be bringing a variety of scenarios with funding sources. To Shane's point, transit tax is a significant funding source for Mountain Line. It's not the only way that we can fund service, and we'll definitely be bringing a variety of options to the TAC and board in August. So thank you again, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Busy. Next item, COVID-19 reopening plan. Kate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the TAC. It's been a while since we've discussed the Mountain Line reopening plan. Next slide, Rhonda. The board adopted the plan last fall. We used the best information available at that time, but as everybody knows, a lot has changed since last September. Vaccines have rolled out and been distributed widely. We know more about how it's spread. At the time, there was a lot of discussion about contact surfaces. We now know it's more airborne. There's a new federal mask requirement that didn't exist at the time. And then we based a lot of our reopening plan off of city and county guiding documents, their own reopening plans or health-related plans. And so ours feels very outdated at this point. So we wanted to bring it back and make some changes to reflect the latest conditions. So next slide. So we're proposing essentially staying in the same phase, which is phase 3, but really relaxing the standards that are within phase 3. The only phase that remains beyond this is phase 4, which is essentially end of the pandemic, return to normal operations. So some of the things that currently are restricted that we are interested in seeing if the board would like to allow are limited travel, professional visitors in the building beyond the lobby. So allowing our guests to come, we can have trainings with outside transit agencies, have consultants over, et cetera. Returning staff to offices. Right now it says we encourage them to work from home. Most of our staff are vaccinated at this point, and instead of encouraging them to work from home, maybe like to encourage them to work from the office, though not require it. Right now, the decision to mask is in the hands of the board, and we're proposing that that just be placed with the federal government through the transit mask requirement. And when the federal government lifted that requirement, we would too. We recognize this takes away that local control of the board, but are interested in seeing if the board is interested in that. And then just increasing flexibility for sanitizing, cleaning, and health screenings that we're currently doing. So that the decisions could be left to staff as needed to adjust rather than have them documented in the plan. Next slide. But we have a big question for TAC. One, are these things right? Are we headed in the right direction? And two, we started having this debate of if we should just be moving to phase 3 with a statement that we will follow any local, state, or federal requirements, which right now would just be the federal mask mandate. Staff could choose to do other things to try to draw riders back to the system and create that sense of safety and security, but it wouldn't be mandated in the plan. So we're very interested in TAC's input on all these items. And with that, I just want to open it up for discussion.
Shane.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Kate, you speak as though the decision is in the board's hands right now on the mask requirement. But aren't we subservient to the federal mandate in your case? So really, you don't have the power right now. It's really in the federal hands. So
correct. I maybe spoke too high level. So it is, we cannot remove the mask mandate, but if the federal government lifted the mask mandate right now, we would still have to go back to the board to have the board lift it. We're
Gotcha.
Suggesting potentially just letting the federal government decide and following the rules that they've set in place.
Great. I know that the city is looking to move into our stage 4 at the end of June. I think it's June 28th is the date that I recall seeing. And stage 4 for us is essentially back to normalcy. And so I guess it makes sense to me to have an extension of the city, that being Mountain Line, and providing these transit services to kind of follow suit with that. Maybe that ought to be the recommendation in terms of moving into your stage 4. I assume 4 for you is more normal, right? It's back to, okay. So
yeah, that's interesting information because it's also back to normal based on the city's plan, and it triggers when the city moves to stage 4. So it may make some of this mute if the city is going to move to stage 4 anyways.
I think my recommendation, Kate, would be to kind of just follow suit with what the city is doing when that timing happens. And of course, you know, we're slave in some regards to what the federal group is doing. I know our housing operation, you know, being so closely regulated by the federal government, you know, there might be some things that are kind of lagging in terms of really returning to that stage 4. But I think maybe the recommendation ought to be to just kind of follow suit with what the city does due to our relationship. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Heather.
So I think the one concern I have, Shane, with the point that you just shared is there's a plan to go to phase 4 on June 28th, but what if that plan changes? If we don't continue and move forward with our changes to our phase 3, then I think we don't move to phase 4 because the city didn't move to phase 4 and we're stuck with a phase 3 that we're unhappy in. So, I mean, I agree with you. I think we're going to ask the board to approve this on June 16th. And immediately on June 28th, we're going to move from phase 3 to phase 4. But I still feel like it's the right conversation to have about how do we change phase 3, just in case the city doesn't move to phase 4. We want to be sure we have a plan in place that really serves our employees the best.
Now, if I could respond, Madam Chair, is that okay?
Stop you. Just kidding. Go ahead, Shane. I'm just teasing you.
I recognize the power.
No, no.
So no, I respect it though. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate the opportunity. So Heather, you know, even the city is making some adjustments to our phase 3 to just adjust to the environment around us. So, I mean, I appreciate the point you're making. By all means, you know, suggest changes in stage 3 that allows your operations and your employees to feel comfortable and to still be safe, whatever that means. But I would just add the caveat in that recommendation to your board that along with moving, you know, with the federal government on the mask mandate, you would also move with the city as we transition officially from stage 3 to stage 4. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. Other comments or questions on this topic for Kate? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Next item is service to proposed Northern Arizona Healthcare Campus. Oh, Kate again. Hi, Kate.
Hi. Well, I've already got a lot of good feedback on this, but do want to provide a more official update on the move of the Northern Arizona Healthcare Campus, NAH, down south of town towards Fort Tuthill. Next slide. So just a high level overview of the proposal. So they're proposing to move just north of Fort Tuthill. There are commercial and research and development uses in addition to the medical campus itself, and it is a full move of the NAH medical campus. They're also showing on site plans how a significant amount of high density housing in the area as well. That said, it's all phased and the timing of the phasing is unknown. And so it does make some of the planning around it difficult to achieve, but the master plan is what you see in front of you. And discussion with the city staff really indicate that they anticipate that while this is the hospital's development, you will see related development spurred all around this area, additional housing, additional uses because of the intensity of the use down here. And then finally, they're also anticipating significant trips per day to the site. I believe that they were anticipating about 50,000 trips per day. So that's a large number of vehicles potentially moving down this direction or people needing to move down this direction. I think while that's a vehicle count, it's representative percentage wise of the number of people who might want to use transit or be bikes or pedestrians to the site as well. And that they did tell us that it is the most significant traffic impact development a development has had that they've ever seen. So interesting on that front. Next slide. So the importance of transit, I brought down to the site. It doesn't sound like I need to convince this group of that very much, but it is a vital service that needs to be accessible by all, including those who don't drive. We're meeting equity and climate goals by providing transit service there. If there's no transit service, that's just more vehicles on the road, congestion, emissions, et cetera. Their current site, we provide 34,000 trips to at each stop per year. There's 2 stops up there. So it is significant. And there are about 100 unique users of their EcoPass program who do use the bus to commute to the hospital, the current location as well. And then additionally, remember, this isn't just the hospital. This is the hospital plus a bunch of other uses if we're thinking about potential trip generation. Increased paratransit costs, especially if no fixed route service. So Mountain Line will be called upon to serve this facility, regardless of a fixed route bus running to it or not. The paratransit vehicles will be required to run for people who are functionally unable to ride the fixed route system. The way we do paratransit is conditional eligibility. So people may not always be able to ride paratransit. They may only be eligible like in snowy conditions or if there's no sidewalk to access the location that they're trying to get to from the bus stop, et cetera. So by not having fixed route system, it opens up the eligibility for paratransit users to this site very significantly. And as you all know, that's a very expensive service for us to run. So by running fixed route, we can reduce the demand on the paratransit program and have some cost savings there. And ultimately, we recognize that if this isn't addressed up front, it will become a Mountain Line issue after the fact. And we don't want to be in that position. And that's been the position with other developments that have moved off of transit service. It is why there is so much demand for transit service to the shelter. They moved off the route and then it became a recognized need after the fact. Same with the Sacred Peaks development. We've heard from them at public comments as well, and they continue to comment to city staff about the need for better transit service to that site. And we really want to avoid it becoming an issue we're all trying to fix after the fact and have a solution that we all have identified up front. Next slide. So very high level, we've mapped out a potential route just to the hospital site to see what it would look like. We're recommending that the service be 20 minutes. That's what they're currently served with. And as we all know, frequency is important. If you only come once an hour, it's just not going to be very useful to the people who are trying to get out there. We estimate that it will take a bus 45 minutes to run from the DCC to the hospital and back. And I will tell you that's a little bit of an awkward timing from a efficient transit planning service. You know, if it was 40 minutes, you could put 2 buses on it and easily have 20-minute service. You know, 2 buses at 45 minutes, that's 22-minute service. It's not a very easy number to split by. And so you typically end up putting a 3rd bus out to keep the 20-minute service. So that inefficiency, I think, creates some of the opportunities that we've talked about, though, because there may be timing now to use the 3 buses, which only need the 60-minute round trip. And now you've got an extra 5 minutes each direction to try to get out to closer to Fort Hill or out to the airport. And so I think that there could be some potential for some of these other partnerships in a very cost-effective way through a service extension versus it being something that kicks it into a 4th bus. That's when you start to, I think it'll become more problematic to figure out who pays or if there's value to do that. But I think there is some potential. I want to emphasize, so this is all very preliminary and we don't actually know what the travel time is going to be. We're working with the city to try to predict that. And this is our current estimate. For us to run 3 buses a year, this is also a very high level cost estimate. It's about $500,000 per bus. So $1.5 million in operating every year to provide that service, plus paratransit costs, and then plus capital costs. So if we needed to buy, we may be able to only buy 2 buses instead of 3. We have a decent spare ratio right now. But we do, you know, that's $1 million a bus and their replacement costs every 15 years. There's some small costs associated with the bus stops themselves, but compared to some of these other numbers we're looking at, that's pretty minor. Next slide. So next steps are we really need to confirm that runtime prediction with the city and metro plan so we can truly do cost estimates and figure out if we can get out to the airport, et cetera. So that's really step 1 that we're working on with the city. And then once we do that, we do want to initiate these conversations with the county regarding how do we serve Fort Hill and the airport about how do we get this route all the way out there. And then really it comes down to negotiating with NAH and the city, who's the one who's going to issue permits for the development. Mountain Line has no authority to ask or to require NAH to do anything about service to the hospital. That authority lies with the city. And so it's going to be a partnership between us and them to make sure that it's fully addressed prior to issuance of any permits or the request to change from a suburban activity center to a regional activity center that has to be approved. Our ultimate goal related to that is that we have all identified how transit is getting paid for prior to those approvals. And if the expectation of this community is that the hospital is pitching into that is identified in the development agreement. If we move forward, our experience without it in the development agreement, our experience has been that every one of those partnerships has fallen apart after the approval process. So handshake agreements just don't work when it comes to money like this that we're talking about, and it does need to be a requirement specifically spelled out. Next slide. So with that, that's everything I have, but wanted to open it up for further discussion or conversation.
Thanks, Kate. Comments, questions? Shane.
So Kate, I'll put my camera on real quick. So Kate, one thing that has helped me remain somewhat hopeful that we have a different outcome with the NAH project than what you've experienced with some of the other developments that have transpired over the last couple of years, is that you have a stronger engagement level at the staff and at the table. Are you, I'm encouraged to hear that. Are you sensing that things are a bit different on this particular project and the track that we're on? I'm asking because, you know, I definitely want to be engaged in helping that process out. I agree that the real key to success here is that the city is asking for those points in the negotiating process, and that's because you're at the table as a representative of staff in the transit service, and so I'm trying to say that carefully. I don't want to misrepresent, but I also feel like something had to change, and at least what was the low-hanging fruit in my mind was making sure that you were at the table on the front end of this with staff in front of NAH, talking about the overall needs of the community and what needs to happen to make those to provide those services. So respond to that a little bit, Kate, and let me know how things are going. Thanks.
Sure. Yes, I agree. I think we have a level of engagement with city staff that we've never seen before on some of these developments. The project manager, Tiffany Antal, and then Jeff Bowman, the engineer, have both been really communicative with us and trying to help figure this out. I think they're all hesitant to make us any promises because they don't get to make promises, right? It's a council decision ultimately. And so I think they're trying to be supportive, but cautiously supportive of any asks for transit, really, you know, continuously stating it's going to come back to a council to make that decision. I think one of the pieces that, so I feel like that's all going really well. I think one of the pieces that makes it difficult as an outside agency is a lot of the discussions happen with council in e-session. And so, you know, I don't know how we get represented through that, or, you know, opportunities to participate if that's available or not. But I think that's one piece, just in my mind, that still is a little bit clouded, is there's so many pre-discussions that occur in an e-session that we're not participating in or hearing the conversations in or able to respond to comments or questions in. So I think maybe there's a way to sit down with you in advance and make sure that you've got all the talking points and information, but otherwise, I would say working with staff so far has been great, and we're very appreciative of them.
Madam Chair, just a quick follow-up to that. Kate, you know, perhaps, and this is just me thinking off the top of my head, but perhaps one thing that we ought to be thinking about is having proactive conversation with the council itself, not specific to a project, but specific to a process. I think when we're talking project, it's emotional at times, and on either side, you know, whether it's the council or it's the applicant, there's emotion involved, and really that's the magic that happens in the council chambers, and I respect that process. But when we talk to council about process, it's not emotional, it's logical. And maybe the conversation with council in a work session, you know, should be, what role should transit play in the dialogue that transpires with these applicants? Does council see the value of having transit as a component of these development agreements? Or should we continue to be off the side? And I'm thinking about like the Timber Sky or the cottage. What was it?
Sky cottages.
Oh, Sky Cottages. That's right. That's right. You know, where it's kind of the city's doing this stuff, and then we're trying to fit in, you know, as a separate component, this discussion about transit and needs of the community. So maybe we need to seriously be thinking about engaging the council in a work session about the process, and not talk about a project, because that then gets kind of emotional. And so you know, just food for thought. You know, sit and digest that a little bit and see, you know, how you guys feel, Heather and Kate, about, you know, about that idea. I mean, obviously I'm just thinking right now off the top of my head, so I haven't engaged Greg or anybody on something like that. But if you're still kind of if staff is feeling a little unsure about how to really push this, maybe we need to help everybody out and have a larger discussion about process with council as it relates to transit services when we approach these development events that happen. So anyway, all right, I'll be quiet. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's, if I can respond real quick, I think that's a great idea, especially as we're talking about Flight Staff in Motion, the 5-year plan. It ties to so many conversations about how we're going to fund new service and what we just talked about there. And so I think that that could be a good way to frame it potentially as related to the 5-year plan and not make it, tied to a specific project. I had one other thought, but now I don't remember. But anyways, I like the idea and I'd definitely be open to having those discussions.
Other comments for Kate? And I'll just say,
I apologize, this is Scott Holcomb. I was just listening to the conversation. If I may step a little bit out of my role, I think Shane's suggestion is a very good one that we really need to work on trying to put that process. I think not only in relation to the 5-year plan, but generally how that process should be for each development agreement. And I think that's I think that would be a major step forward. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll step back into my legal role now.
Okay. And I was just going to add, it's not the first time we've had this conversation in these meetings about how you guys are not at the table. And I do also appreciate Shane changing how that is approached. So it's not project specific, but rather looking to get you guys as part of the actual process. So thank you. Anybody else have comments for Kate? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on. The last item in our discussion items, the CASPAR Headquarters Master Plan. Anne.
Anne, I think you're on mute.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Greetings all. I'm Ann Dunno, Capital Project Manager, and I'd like to provide an update on the CASPAR Headquarters Master Plan that we will be kicking off here shortly. We will be just seeking direction from the board, but there's no specific recommendation from staff at this time. A little bit of background on the CASPAR facilities. Next slide, please, Rhonda. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Thanks, Rhonda. So the CASPAR Headquarters Master Plan is going to be a plan to look at Mountain Line facilities at this location. As mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of changes and growth with Mountain Line over the last decade, and we are looking at future projects with the Downtown Connection Center, potentially a campus bus storage facility, and we also have our zero emissions plan outlining the fleet transition over the next decade. So we have a lot of capital related pieces that we want to look at and how that fits into the puzzle, let alone our transit planning efforts with busy and what might happen with future service. So we are going to take a look at this campus. And as you can see, we have the 3 parcels that we're currently located at with our bus storage, maintenance, and administrative facilities. And then there's also the vacant land piece as well. So the key goals of the project are really going to be looking at this location from a long-term perspective, doing our best to put on our forecasting for maybe a 20 to 30-year horizon, and to best maximize the uses of this facility in terms of the different operational functions and maintenance functions. And as I mentioned, we do have other projects, for example, the DCC, that will be relocating some staff to the new facility. So that will free up some capacity at this location for other uses. So that will be part of the conversation during this master planning. Same with potential for grants, with opportunities to work with NAU for campus bus storage, could potentially move 10 buses out of this location, which would free up some space. And then there's also the zero admissions plan, which needs to really be looked at more closely. We anticipate receiving 2 electric buses in August of 2023. So we really need to start planning how are we going to charge those buses, where, working on all the technical aspects of that. And then also looking to the long term of charging up more buses in the future. So there's kind of a lot of pieces, technical pieces, working with a consultant on the opportunities here. We also would have the consultant look at the vacant property as well to identify and recommend the highest and best uses for Mountain Line at that location. And we would, incorporate that into the planning process. We do anticipate bringing on an architect engineering vendor, consultant, and hopefully by August. So we would release a procurement here in late June and kick off the process in August. And then we would be coming back to TAC and board for feedback as we're going through the master planning for general feedback and potential decision points. So with that, I don't know if there's questions, comments.
Questions or comments for Anne? Shane.
Hi, Ann. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Good. Thank you for the presentation. Perhaps you mentioned it. I had a quick distraction and I missed it, but just wanted to make sure that on the radar for Mountain Line as you're embarking on this endeavor, that you've got the city's transportation master plan in mind and the connection, desired connection between Linda Vista and Caspar, or what is the other one? Anyway, I know that there's some kind of connection there that is desirable from a circulation standpoint. So I just wanted to make sure that that's kind of on your radar as you work through this planning exercise. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Dilly. Thank you for the comments. And yes, as part of that feasibility aspect to that, the vacant land, we would be providing input with the consultant to what the opportunities could be there. There is, as you're aware, the Caspar intersection project that was on a separate item here and a progress update is not going to be constructed by Mountain Line. The bids came in over $1 million. So that intersection is at this point definitely undetermined future for when that could be built. But as part of that planning process, definitely would bring in city stakeholder feedback for sure. Any other questions?
I am not seeing or hearing any. Okay, thanks, Anne.
Thank you.
So as a reminder, the other items that are on the agenda are in our packets. So the consent items as well as the progress reports. And I'd like to give folks a minute if anybody, oh, Heather's got a, Heather.
I apologize, Madam Chair. I forgot to mention to you that we need to pull the AECom consent item before the board meeting. It will be moved out of consent and onto discussion action. And I'd like to ask Anne or I'm sorry, Kate to speak on that item briefly before we move on.
Okay.
Would you like me to go, Madam Chair?
Yes, please. Thanks, Kate.
Just wanted to provide a quick update on this one. So one of the large task orders that AECom has was the Caspar intersection project. They were going to project manage it for us, as well as we're providing support on transit signal priority needs. So as I wrote this staff report, that project was a go and moving forward. So that line is in there. However, I'm not sure if all of you are aware that the bids for the Caspar intersection project came in significantly over budget, $1 million over budget. It's just not something that Mountain Line can afford or believes is worth transit tax dollars at that price. So with that, we closed the awards, the bid without award, the procurement without award, and we'll no longer need those services from AECOM. So I will be updating this before it goes to the board, and I just wanted to provide that background.
Thanks, Kate. That's unfortunate. Was there a reason why? Like,
I think part of it is just escalation costs that we've seen over the past year for many materials. It's also, it ended up being more extensive than we initially considered with the grading that needed to happen.
Okay.
So it's just an expensive piece of roadway to build.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks, Kate. Shane.
Hey, thanks, Kate. Madam Chair, the one comment that I was going to have about the consent agenda was this item, and you know, and kind of questioning whether or not this really ought to be pulled out for discussion anyway, with your, you know, with the board. Can you tell me, Kate, what the total cost is for AECOM tied to the Downtown Connection Center? I know that you've got them engaged in a lot of different projects, right? It's not just the DCC. I was in the staff report, it showed tasks 6 through 14, but not all of those are DCC, and I know that there's 1 through 5 that aren't represented there. Are you feeling comfortable with the total contract with AECOM? And kind of where do you guys sit at this point? Thanks.
Yeah, so AECOM was hired as general consulting services, of which DCC was one. And so they've had many projects over the last 4 years of their contract that they've checked off. And that's why there's many missing numbers in the task orders. Those projects are done and complete. The DCC task order total value, we did amend it to increase the price when we got the $15 million grant, because originally this contract was for the $6.7 million project that we had an award for through ADOT. So we did amend the contract last year to recognize the larger project that was now going to occur. And their total value is about $1.5 million for essentially 30% plans. And what that's going to get us through the City of Flagstaff approvals for the conditional use permit, as well as the NEPA process. We're feeling good about that budget right now. I think, I don't think there's going to be money left over, but I think they're going to get the task done for that price. We anticipate going out to bid for architecture and engineering services here in the next month or two, so that somebody's on board as that wraps up this fall and can keep moving forward. So that's our plan. I do feel good. I will say that this is the last year that we can extend this general consulting services contract. It was only allowed to be a 3-year contract with 2 1-year extensions, and we are entering the last 1-year extension. So no new task orders going to AECOM. It's really about wrapping up existing projects at this time.
Okay, thank you. I will just take the opportunity to let you know, I think internally we've made a decision as a city to move forward with the Phoenix Avenue Bridge project. And so don't be surprised to see that one land on the agenda in the next week or two for bid approvals and to move forward with it. Thanks.
Good to know. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other comments or questions on the consent agenda items or progress reports? I have one, but I want to give an opportunity for other folks. My one question is actually for John. So John, with the selection of the vendor for the mobile ticketing, because I read in the report it also, and eventually look at doing for the Eco Pass, but how does that impact? Because NAU, we had worked together to get the mobile credentials for NAU's Eco Pass. Does that change that at all? Please say no. He might be muted. And I should have asked if John was here. Sorry. If John's not here, I can take it offline with him on my own.
Madam Chair, I don't think John is online for this, but I will say I don't think that moving forward with token transit changes where we're at with NAU.
Fantastic.
And the app. So
excited to get that up and running. So okay. Heather, did you have any current events that you wanted to go through?
I
Okay.
do.
There you go.
I'd be happy to share a couple of current events for you. We do, although it's been such a great meeting, it's sad to talk about, but we want to take a moment to recognize the tragedy last month that involved our friends at Valley Transportation Authority in San Jose, California. We, along with many other transit agencies, used social media to express our condolences and then wanted to assure TAC and board that we did reach out to our staff in case this event triggered a need by any of our team members for support and offered what services are available to them. Mountain Line, on other notes, Mountain Line did launch or is launching a summer youth pass for kids 7 through 17 that allows them to have unlimited rides all summer long for the low, low price of $24, part of our Welcome Back campaign. We are working on a Welcome Back Rider campaign, and we look forward to sharing those components with board and TAC members as we release the various pieces of that campaign. Happy to report all of Mountain Line's current EcoPass partners, which includes Coconino County, the City of Flagstaff, Northern Arizona University, and Northern Arizona Healthcare, have renewed their fiscal year 2022 passes for their employees. We appreciate the support of these community partners in providing this benefit, the benefit of transit to their employees. ADOT recently notified us that of our annual 5310 and 5311 federal funding awards, these funds support our mobility management program, as well as taxi, van pool, and certain trips that exceed ADA requirements on our paratransit program. Just a couple quick other announcement. Transit planner Busy Collins participated in a panel hosted by the Transit Cooperative Research Center. I think I got that name wrong. The group developed a publication, Innovative Practices for Transit Planning at Small and Mid-Sized Agencies. And that publication is now available for our transit peers and for the public. 3 innovative Mountain Line practices are featured in this publication, and we wanted to express our gratitude for Busy for participating and representing us. A couple quick anniversaries. Karen Moeller has been a paratransit operator for us for 7 years. Jen Petrie is a transit bus operator on the fixed route side for 10 years. Rhonda Cashman, our clerk of the board, is celebrating 10 years this month. Rob Leslie, 6 years, and he is a transit operator. Tamara Pittman, who works in our front office, has 5 years of service. And Mark White started 1 year ago as a transit bus operator. And then, of course, we're celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Metroplan joining the Mountain Line team. And so it is Rosie Weir, Dave Wessel, and Jeff Malbeck's 1-year anniversary as Mountain Line employees. And my last current event is to recognize our outgoing chair, Erin Stom. So this will be Erin's last meeting as our chair, and she has served us for at least 2 years in this go, but I know she's served us in the past, and we appreciate her leadership at our meetings and wanted to say thank you. And also wanted to recognize that Vice Chair Shane Dilley will ascend to the chair role in August as per our rules of procedure. And at that time, we will also conduct election for a new vice chair.
Is there an opportunity to question that process? I sure enjoy Erin being there. Maybe we ought to just keep her in as another year.
pretty sure I've done 4 at this point in the last 10. So I am more
really?
than happy. Yes, I've done, right, I think, or maybe it's more than that. Because I was the vice chair and then chair, and Joanne and I flipped back and forth a few times. So I am more than happy to pass on the crown. Thank you.
Maybe I need to question that it's really been a year. I mean, it just seems like it's just yesterday, Aaron. So is there something wrong with my internal clock? Has it really been that long?
Yeah, it's called COVID.
Oh.
And Lucinda had her hand. I don't know what,
Yes.
but you wanted to call on Lucinda.
Well, I just wanted to thank Erin for her leadership and support through this effort. You've done a tremendous job, Erin, managing these meetings, and definitely appreciate the time and energy that you put into it. So thank you. And I also wanted to congratulate Rhonda and thank her for her commitment to the board and TAC, and to NAPTA and the community. She's just an incredible resource, and really appreciate her 10 years of public service. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucinda, and thank you, Heather and Shane, for the kind words. I appreciate it. But honestly, what I've said, and I've said this for years, when I encourage other people to step up, is honestly, all this is really helping to move the meeting through the process. But Rhonda and Heather and the whole Mountain Line team, they pull all this together. All I do, honestly, is read off the agenda items and try to engage the conversation. And so I strongly encourage folks to please throw your hat into the ring to be vice chair with the eventual progress of stepping into the chair role. It really is you're already here for the meetings. It's actually a very simple way to share of yourself. But as I shared with Heather, I said I was definitely looking forward to being a passenger for a while, because I have been being the driver for a while. So I need to just, take a back seat if that's okay. So thank you, guys.
Madam Chair, you've done a stellar job, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you've just done a great job. I know that you put it quite simply, the role that you play, but it's been enlightening to have you at the helm. And so anyway, big shoes to fill for me, and but thank you so much.
Thanks, Shane. I appreciate it. If there are no other comments or questions, listen to your hand is up. I didn't know if you just didn't put it down or if you had one more thing to share.
No, I'm good. I
Okay.
apologize.
No, you're totally fine. I didn't want to pass you over. So just a reminder to folks, there is no July meeting. So please have a safe and enjoyable 4th of July. And we will see everybody back here August 5th. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.